welcome. It is a stunning background, isn't it? The Houses of Parliament right here in central London is where we're coming to you from. Well, we do know that the media is the watchdog, and who watches us? It is, of course, the viewers. Who watches, who criticizes, who contributes? It is you, the viewers. But then, did you know that in London, or rather the UK, there is this body, a forum, which is headed by some senior media members here in London, which essentially is playing the watchdog over the watchdog, which is the Indian Forum on British Media.
That's
right?
yeah.
So their job is to see what the media does, criticize, but also contribute constructively. So I'm going to find out the trends in British media. I'll begin with asking how it was 20 years ago. Was the British media kind? What do you monitor?
Well, at that time in 90s and 80s and 90s, things had changed, because when we came in the beginning in 60s and 70s, it was worse. But gradually by 80s and 90s, it had become more malleable to India. And in many ways, what they were saying at that time in 80s and 90s, that India is not progressing, because at that time the economy was not yet open, which opened after 90s only. So at that time, economy was not open. But when Manmohan Singh and Narasimha Rao, they did open the economy, it was welcomed by the British media as well. But they always thought that India cannot progress, and it could have progressed better if it had remained with the British Empire. So that was the thinking even in the 80s.
Even in the 80s.
Even
and 90s.
in the
So was it very negative? What was it, controversial? The presentation of news from India,
yeah.
on India.
For example, if there's something happens there, any rape or anything which is happening in India at that time even also.
Okay.
And so they always used to give them prominence, that India cannot rule itself.
Right.
Indians are unable to rule India
right.
in the best way as Britons used to do.
Okay.
So we were always talking about nostalgic British Empire or British Raj in India.
Okay, it took some time for them to get over it, to the
Yeah.
fact that India was independent and the economy was booming. What then does the forum do? How do you monitor? What is your main job and objective?
There were about half a dozen of us who are committee members, monitorees. One, of course, see the TV on a regular basis.
Okay.
Two, read the newspapers, look at magazines, read about 3-4 newspapers every day.
Okay. So
If
it's
something
media
out-
all across,
media
mainstream,
all
British
across.
media, print, television,
Online.
all
Yeah.
medias, okay?
Now, when something outrageous comes up, when something very, very derogatory about India, and we find that the British media crosses the line, then we take it up with the editor, or if the writer himself gives the email ID, take it up with him. More often than not, these our letters are not published, but I'm sure they take this into cognizance as our response.
That there is somebody at least watching.
Yeah. There is, of course, you still have Ofcom, like an industry watchdog for media in this country, but the only time that it has taken anything of cognizance is only in the last 10 years, was only Shilpa Shetty.
Okay.
That's the only issue that came up.
Okay, all right. Mr. Raleigh, is there any incidents that you can share with us where you had written to some top editor of mainstream British media without naming the organization, and they took it up and they probably put out a clarification, an apology?
Oh yes, yes.
Yeah?
For example, some of the main media, the Guardians and the Independent, when they used to write about it, we would write to them, and they would then give explanation to us. They would write back to us and they would give explanation. I think, well, that is what sometimes they would put the whole blame on the columnist, the person who has written, he has written the things about it.
Yeah.
But the main problem which came was that most of the people who were in India, and they were writing for the newspaper from India. So what they used to send, so these people here would say, well, we don't know, our man there has written to us, and so he is on the spot. You see, when Mark Tully was there, for example, in the beginning he was also very negative about India. But gradually India has absorbed him. and in many ways,
He absorbed India rather.
yeah, and he has been so much pro-India after that. And many things which he has done is very constructive. And people in this country now feel this thing that India is really progressing.
Mr. Raleigh, has the trend changed? Today, is India comfortable with its position in the world, and are things changing today?
Yes, in many ways, why it has changed is, I think, after the economy was liberated. That was the first thing in 90s. But then again in 2000, when Vajpayee became the Prime Minister, and he came here and he met with many people, they were still very skeptic about BJP. They were always saying that in India, the democracy, whether it will stay or not. They were always thinking that democratic is an experiment in India. Perhaps it may fail like it has failed in Pakistan and other countries. It may not survive in India also. But when Vajpayee became the Prime Minister, and after Vajpayee the new government came, and then they started thinking that perhaps India is a real democracy.
Okay, very briefly, what would your message be on content to mainstream British media? Since you do the job of monitoring each time, are they okay now? What would you say to them?
In the recent past, they're okay. In the sense there is some semblance of balance.
Okay.
And there's positive information being passed on to the British people here. Not like about 10-15 years back, if you notice, it was always bad news. It's now some good news with a sense of balance. And like the latest was, for example, Kabali fever. I mean, one never thought it'll come in Guardian.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the BBC.
And the BBC. Yeah. We never thought that these things will appear here at all.
Yeah.
I mean, they said that it is something that even a Hollywood star cannot aspire for.
Yeah. But Rajinikanth is TRP, right?
Exactly. And the same thing happened even with Modi's arrival here.
Yes.
His in Wembley, for example. It's so much so, they said, look, like a rock star. He had 70,000 people in Wembley Stadium.
To attract that kind of crowd.
Never before, never after did a politician manage to attract 70,000 people in one place in UK.